Why isn't bowling considered to be a real sport by the masses? We as bowlers know just how much skill and dedication it takes to be a competitive bowler, but for many, they don't give our sport the respect it deserves. But why does bowling get disrespected by so many? Bowling is seen, unfortunately, as that fun activity you do a few times a year with friends, and many out there would never consider bowling to be a sport. But in this video, I'm going to break down some of the public misconceptions, and for anyone watching who believes bowling is not a real sport, give me a few minutes of your time and I will show you how wrong you are. First of all, let's define what a sport actually is. According to the dictionary, a sport is an activity involving physical exertion and skill in which an individual or team competes against another or others for entertainment. Sounds like bowling, right? There's physical skill, there's competition, and there's definitely entertainment. So why does bowling get the cold shoulder? Let's be honest, bowling has a bit of an image problem. There's just so many misconceptions and people just see it as a fun thing to do with some friends and have a few drinks, or something you do for a 10-year-old's birthday party. And because it's considered to be such a leisure activity, it's hard for people outside of the bowling world to then associate it as a real sport. And let's not forget about the stars of professional bowling, because if we're being completely honest, when we look at the history of pro bowlers, most of them have never really looked like athletes. When you switch on a basketball game, for example, you can see the athleticism straight away, whereas with bowling, if we're honest, they don't look particularly athletic, but what they do have is an immense amount of skill. Unfortunately, people often forget the part of the definition of a sport that we discussed. There is clearly physical skill involved in bowling, but because it's nowhere near as physical as the main sports that many love, people just dismiss bowling as a pastime or fun activity. But make no mistake, you have to have a good level of fitness to be a pro bowler, because you have to bowl a lot of games. If you come across someone who ridicules bowling, challenge them to bowl 18 games in a day and see how they get on. Another problem is the lack of bowling stars that cross over into the mainstream, although that has been helped in recent times by Jason Belmonte. He has inspired a generation, and whatever you feel about two-handed bowling, it has inspired the young players across the globe because it's made the game more accessible. So despite all the people who still claim bowling isn't a sport, bowling clearly checks all the boxes. Skill? Definitely. Precision? Absolutely. Consistency? Well, you just try throwing the same shot 12 times in a row for a perfect game, and all bowlers, no matter their level, have had to train and put in the work to get where they are now, and I think we've clearly shown that bowling fits the description of a sport perfectly. So why does bowling still get the cold shoulder when it comes to sports? What it really comes down to is the fact that bowling doesn't have the same visibility, sponsorship or mainstream coverage as other sports. It's a chicken and egg problem. No respect, less coverage. Fewer young people take it seriously, which means no respect. And another big problem, in my opinion, is that bowling is not an Olympic sport. If it was included, I think it would go a long way to raising bowling's profile. And while you wouldn't convince everybody, you would definitely start to change the opinion of some. If bowling was an Olympic sport, I think it would start to be seen differently and start to expose the sport to people who don't have knowledge of what bowling is all about. If bowling wants to be taken seriously, there clearly has to be some changes. There needs to be something that starts to turn the tide of opinion. And to me, it either needs to be a new star who is able to break that barrier between bowling and the mainstream, or something like bowling being included in the Olympics. Exposure is the key word, because bowling is a complicated sport. There are so many things going on that people cannot see. Many don't know anything about oil patterns. The scoring system turns people's heads. People can't understand at first how the pros can hook the ball like they do. But with that bit of exposure, people do start to warm to bowling. Once they start to understand all the factors they cannot see, suddenly they start to see bowling as a sport. And a perfect example of this would have been something like the Weber Cup. That got some pretty big coverage on the main sports channel, Sky Sports. And every year, you would hear people talk about the fact that they watched some of the tournament on TV and they don't know very much about bowling, but they would say they had a lot of fun watching it. And that's the thing. If it's not there, people don't watch it, they don't consume it, they don't know anything about it. So it really is the exposure. Easy to say, actually doing something about it is another thing. Many people, bowlers themselves, will say that bowling is a dying sport, but I don't agree at all. Yes, it's nowhere near what it was, of course, we all know that, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have potential, and it doesn't take a lot for things to turn around. As I mentioned, all it takes is for just one thing to spark something, to spark that interest, to get bowling and get the momentum going again. But I think the main thing we can all agree upon is that bowling is a sport, and a sport of focus, discipline, and mental toughness. But most importantly, it's a sport that welcomes everybody, no matter your age or skill level. And at the end of the day, isn't that what sports are really all about? So the next time somebody tells you bowling isn't a real sport, challenge them to an 8-game match and see if they still insist it doesn't take physical skill. So that brings us to an end of today's video. I hope you all enjoyed this one. If you have enjoyed what you've seen here today, I would really appreciate it if you would consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss any of my future videos. That's going to do it from me for today, and as always, thank you bowling fans, and see you all next time.
His first major victory.
A major ham bone.
He's a gutsy kid. He's not afraid of anything. We have the ball game.
Make him earn it.
You heard him say it. Make him earn it. 7-pin in the 6. Remember that frame.
6 in a row to close. Strike.
Not one single emotion